All right, what's up, people? This is Mike Christian with America's New Clothes. I'm very excited to have my friend Brian Doherty here with me. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, so everybody has this experience where you are posting things that you're reading about in the news. You're sharing your thoughts, your opinions. Everybody has them, and somebody comes in and rains on your parade or has an opinion that differs from you. And naturally, the notion of social media has not only separated us into these filter bubble silos where the social media companies figured out that we're most serotonin driven by the things that we agree with, but it makes all hell break loose, and we end up having these endless threads of asynchronous arguments. Am I right, Brian? We agree on that.
100%. And I think one thing that's great about this format is that even though before we started this, we knew we had some deep differences about where the country is and where the country's headed, we both wanted to explore each other's ideas and see where there can be some common grounds. And I think so often today, that you don't get that enough. And so I appreciate you having me on for that.
Well, I mean, I think a synchronous discussion lends itself better to, first of all, humanity, hopefully. I mean, there's no hold bar here. We can go whatever we want. But I think the idea of being able to complete a thought, the idea of being able to have something where you're able to get alignment and agreement in the course of your statement, I think lends itself to a better parliamentary process, right? I mean, we've of course seen legislators devolve into chaos as well, but I think the fact that we have the chance to find something that we agree on is a point of hopefulness, right?
So 100%. And the only way to beat bad ideas is with good ideas. And so those ideas have to be discussed. And so often today, if you're not lined up just the right way, people won't often hear everything else you got to say. So we got to make sure that any thoughts and ideas, put them out there and discuss them, because that's what America's all about.
Amen, my brother. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of context. Brian and I know each other. We are in a fraternity together. Won't go into the actual details of it, but I would say we're acquaintances. We have friends in common. We probably mutually have closer friends in common, but we are, a couple degrees separated. And I'm seeing that most of the arguments that happen on social media are happening in such a way that you're seeing more of these proxy kind of fights, right? Your close friend won't be your close friend won't be the one that argues with you. It'll be somebody who's effectively a proxy, right?
Right.
So it lends itself to two possibilities, right? One is you have it can devolve into a disaster, of course, right? Because
which they oftentimes do. And
you also have situations where, you because you don't have as much invested in that relationship, you probably, you could take it or leave it, right? And so there's a lot of, bombs dropped. I'm guilty of it. Okay, that was a mic drop. I'm heading out, and I'm going to leave that one to fester. So I think it would be most helpful. I mean, first of all, I want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of understanding. Obviously, the topic du jour is the election, right?
And how are you doing? Are you doing all right, Mike?
I'm doing good. I'm fighting the fight. Well, I'll tell you what. So I've had a number of texts from people saying, "Hey, are you okay? Hanging in there." Totally know what this is like from 2016.
Sure.
And my reaction is always, look, I don't. This is not to me a loss, which I'm ready to concede. I've looked at the numbers, and I've never spent so much time in Excel. I've never spent so much time poring over the Secretary of State websites to look at the data. And so I'm going, okay, I'm not sitting here in a place where I'm saying, because here's the thing. If Trump I see the election season, or if you could even call it that. I mean, we're still running the same election season that we were in 2015, right?
Right.
It's contiguous. The resistance to Trump throughout the administration was so vehement that there was, I would say there was never really a full acceptance. Hashtag not my president never really died down, right? So in that time, I say, okay, in the time of the election season, we're battling for hearts and minds, right? We're out there, we're giving our 2 cents about things, we're drawing analogies, we are appealing to our friends' moral sense. I mean, I always describe it to say, if you and I had if I had an argument with a Delta Airlines customer service professional, and I was wronged in some way by the company, or I had a situation that was to be handled, we would probably agree on 90 to 95% of the situations, whether it's, here's what happened in this car accident, here's what happened with this insurance claim, here's what happened with that I was, dealing with a corporation. And so I say, if we have such commonality in our ethical sensibilities or how we look at the world, then surely we have to have a greater overlap in our politics, right?
Right.
I mean, surely we have to have things that we agree on more. So I look at that and I say, okay, so we're battling for hearts and minds, and then we get up to the election and we say, so let's see where the chips fell across the country, across the nation, electoral college included, and say, where did we end up? And in my heart, I think that we have to agree that election integrity is of utmost importance, right? I mean, the importance of, I'm not going to convince you, if I'm a small government guy, you're a big government guy, you're a healthcare for all, Medicare for all guy, and I'm a private insurance guy. We might be, a good, 135 degrees off of each other on these things, and we're not going to catch. But we have to at least agree that the process by which we decide these things, that has to maintain some form of integrity. That has to get it right.
Right. And I think let's put a little context here so that people know what's going on with me and my background. So my name's Brian Doherty. I live here in San Diego, and I'm an employment labor law attorney. Okay. I represent a lot of the major unions here in San Diego and Imperial County. Okay. So what does that mean? That means, I represent a lot of people who get injured on the job, and who these injuries are debilitating for them. And they're a working class family. And when injuries occur to them or their economic outlook changes, it can be real devastating. These are people oftentimes who are living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe there's only one person who's bringing home a check. And so I'm coming from this perspective of pro-labor. I'm a pro-labor guy. And so, I'm a lifelong Democrat, although I do have my complaints with the Democratic Party, a ton of them. But so that's the lens in which I look through things, which is, look, I want fairness. I want people to be able to make a decent living. I want people to, if the government's not going to get involved in things, then private enterprise needs to be able to give people, adequate health care and a retirement of some kind, and to job security. And so I do believe that the diminishment of union power and control has led to a shrinking of the middle class. Now, I get fights all the time about that concept, but this is the lens that I sort of really feel like where Trump, to his credit, sort of touched into, which were these middle class, blue collar workers who saw the Democrats and saw free trade, saw sort of these Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, big business, big tech, big donation, support of the Democratic Party, and sort of this move away from where's the working class man? How is he getting taken care of? And I think, to his credit, Trump saw that, and he sort of painted the Democratic Party now as sort of the coastal elites, and they're disconnected, and their policies don't actually help working class families; they hurt them. And so Trump tapped into that, and so that's something that, in my mind, where the Democrats really need to look at and sort of figure out in the messaging.
Where do you see? Because I see the same thing. I see that in the 70s or even the early 80s, right? a large percentage of the middle class, the middle working class, was voting for Democrats for exactly the kind of the reasons you're describing.
Sure.
And I don't know, when I see guys that are working on construction sites, I am not seeing them voting for the Democrats at this point, because I think the messaging and really, I mean, the policies that shrink cheap labor in this country are good for the working class, right? It's supply and demand. An unfettered supply of domestic labor is going to naturally drive down wages, right? So now, granted, if you're arguing from a union perspective, and I met a lot of, when I was running for Congress, I met a lot of guys that were in the unions, and they were able to point to, it was an affinity play, right? It was like they were kind of told, this is who we want. I know we don't have to get into the details of prevailing wage here in San Diego and some of the ways in which the cost of building has been increased by some of the union lobbying. But,
sure.
But adding color to that, because I've definitely seen, it's not just Trump's messaging that's doing it. It's the actual behavior of the world.
For sure. No. And I agree with that. And I think the Democrats have to make sure, and that if, Joe Biden does become the president, that they have to get back to some of that. And I feel like sometimes these issues that they do sort of, stake the flag on may not necessarily represent, that working class family. And in truth, you mentioned immigration, which was, something we didn't mention, but you mentioned job supply. And I sort of tie that to the immigration policies, whereas the Democrats weren't always as much sort of pro-immigration as they used to. And it was because of those union ideas that they wanted to protect, jobs and that was something that's sort of changed.
Feinstein or Pelosi talking in the early 1990s.
Right.
The Democrat agenda was not to, there was no interest in open borders. There was no interest in unfettered labor supply. And actually, you can go all the way back to the United Farm Workers.
That's very true.
Every city, we've got a Cesar Chavez Boulevard. Well, what did Cesar Chavez do? Cesar Chavez would build these wetlands of folk. It's where the term, the pejorative term, wetback came from, right? Is that these guys would go, and when they weren't picking in the fields, they were themselves taking upon themselves to be more or less an armed militia that was keeping folks from coming across the border, because they knew that if they had 3x the time, the size of population to be able to go pick strawberries, that they weren't going to be able to get the wages that they wanted, right? So where did that sensibility go away with the Democrat Party? My theory is that they said, look, we're going to have probably, 4 or 5 to 1 odds that somebody who's using the social services and coming into the country is going to probably end up voting Democrat. So it ends up being a voter base that votes for Democrats.
Okay, so here's the thing:
maintain power.
Right. No, and I get that, and those are strategic decisions by people in the party. And I can't sit here today and neither do I expect it from you to defend every party position or party idea. I can tell you for myself, right? I can tell you for myself what strikes me and what I found distasteful about President Trump and the way he approached it, and why, even though Barack Obama was the great deporter, he was pushing, he had some pretty heavy-handed, I didn't love the language. I didn't love what I felt like are sort of this, and this may come from my Catholic upbringing, and sort of this idea of be wary of marginalized or maybe vulnerable groups of people. And it just seemed like rather than sticking to topics like we're talking about right now about jobs, it some of it seemed there was the tone and the way that it was described I didn't like, and I felt like it was blame your problems on these types of these individuals. And there's also just this idea about America being this land of opportunity and being, I mean, I'm Irish. And so I really have a sensitivity for this country was built on immigrants and things like that. And I know that times change and maybe realities change.
What?
But for me, let me just finish this one point.
Yeah,
for me, it felt like, oh my gosh, these people are upset. They're losing their jobs. Let me give you someone who you can vent this frustration at and this anger towards. Now,
right.
and again, that could just be not what he was saying, because people always wanted to say that, well, it wasn't immigrants, it was illegal immigrants. But it was a combination of, gosh, it was tough on everything. So one of the things you know about me is that I work for, I play Gaelic football. I'm a part of a crew here in San Diego. And we rely a lot of times on J1 students and people coming over from Ireland. And a lot of these kids are, college educated, they're driven. And we had it where literally their bags were getting searched from Dublin Airport, and they were at the level of security was on a new level, and I just felt like it just seemed like such an aggressive push. And I mean, even the wall, I think he could sit there and I have a lot of friends who work in Border Patrol and ICE and Department of Homeland Security, and there was a lot of practical reasons why improvement along the wall, but I'm wary of vulnerable groups being targeted and being laid out to be the cause of our problems, and that if we solve that problem, your jobs will come back, your lives will improve. So just from that perspective, when I hear that language, I can't help but go back and think about leaders in the past who pointed to marginalized groups and use that as a tool. You're talking about a strategy. Well, the Democrats have a strategy of getting these immigrants to come over, get them in social, maybe they start voting. This I felt was a strategy of saying like, well, focus your aggression on them. They're the cause, and I will fix that. And so to me, it was just kind of like, it was too much. If it was
tonality, it was tonality for you?
I mean, look, Trump is unlike any president I've seen in my lifetime. And the way that he speaks,
Naturally.
In one sense, it says, well, geez, that guy's not getting note cards. He's not reading a teleprompter. He's shooting whatever goes in here comes out his mouth. And so to some people, it's like, well, geez, I can appreciate that authenticity, because so many politicians are unwilling to really say what they think. And they're unwilling to, let's just be honest, offend anyone. Yeah. Because they're worried about being canceled, or they're worried about this or worried about that. And so Trump's language, sometimes it rubbed me. I didn't like it. I didn't appreciate it. And I can tell you this, when the primaries were happening, I was way more worried about Ted Cruz or one of these other guys. I was like, Trump's going to be like a New York conservative. He doesn't care about social stuff. He just wants low taxes, and he's not going to get involved in a lot of these wedge issues. I mean, this guy was palling around in Hollywood, he was hanging around with people. He was on WWE. This guy is just a business guy, but he really did. He said, I'm drawing a line here, and I got to do this to protect America. And if the people who don't want this are looking to destroy America. And I was just like, whoa, like to me, that was language of just like, right or wrong. Some people believe that. It was.
All right, let me respond. So please. First off, I appreciate that you didn't conflate legal immigration with illegal immigration, right? I think that's an important thing. A lot of people don't have the capacity to do that. I appreciate that that Obama actually did do deportations, right? I mean, for all the kids in cage memes I see, it's like, look, I mean, even the most left-wing fact checkers have said, you're taking pictures from 2015. This is, not to be, not to be pinned on Trump here. For me, I would much prefer somebody who brashly tells me the truth to somebody who is a mellifluous orator like Obama, who is, telling me one thing but doing another, right? I like that level of authenticity. The fact that he meanders without the teleprompter, but that no filter, it's sort of like, if you're not lying, you don't need to worry. And and everybody says, oh, 20,000 lies. And I'm like, okay, we'll go through the lies. Go through the lies, and nobody can come up with a one. And so I'm always like, okay, guys, like at least acknowledge that the notion and for the people who say, oh, Democrats, Republicans, two halves of the same thing. I think his administration has proved, with the Lincoln Project and rhinos coming each which way, you do start to see that, look, Trump had to take on not only the Democratic Party, but also the Republican Party, also the deep state, also the establishment. And he's done all of these things. And he hung his 2016 campaign on two pillar issues that, you had the Koch brothers who were, pro-immigration from a Chamber of Commerce point of view, where we want to minimize the
more libertarian,
right? Very, very libertarian, and saying, look, well, corporate profits are going to drive up with cheap labor. And then from a trade perspective, the notion of the global supply chain, the notion that we are just going to be a nation of white collar jobs, and then these menial serfs, and there's not going to be a middle class, but it's going to drive profits. And I see that as all the negative externalities that go into cobalt mining for laptop batteries, to making sure that the Yangtze River is full of pollution, but we're not worried about it here. So I see those as policies that just don't really hold if you're being true to the things that you say are your value set. So we're already in agreement that you're more studied on the truth about where the Democrats are. I mean, in terms of the feelings, I think one of the problems is you got the media who, it's like when the line, I think it was his coming down the escalator line where he said, Mexico's not sending their best, and they edited this clip to make it sound like he was, that all Mexicans were rapists. And it was like, it was so disingenuous, because the low information voter who's just picking up a couple things is seizing upon this racism. We're not talking about all the positive policies that he's doing. And we're just, I mean, if we could have taken racism and Russian collusion out of the last 4 years, maybe people would know about opportunity zones. Maybe people would know about the First Step Act. Maybe people would know about right to try. I mean, there are so many different things that he did, and so many policies that actually had a great impact on all of us, top to bottom. And I blame the media for, just constantly this drumbeat that this guy must leave. And so
I want to address a couple of things, right? If I can. So let's talk about the racism thing. All right. People are like, it's unfair. Hell, you got Biden even, said he was racist straight up, which I don't know if we've ever seen, at least in my time, a president openly say that to, or excuse me, a presidential candidate say that to the president, but I don't.
You're talking about the 1994 crime bill, or are you talking about you ain't black if you don't vote for me?
No, what I'm trying to get to is why, and I know it's easy to say, well, the media just rubs it up, but why do some, people have questions about potentially where Donald Trump's head is and where he views things? Okay. And I'm just going to lay out a couple of things for you that I interpreted that, I wasn't sure if I thought he was racist straight out, but I had questions about sort of his thoughts. And if I could lay these out for you, you can sort of address them where they were. Okay. One, the birther controversy with President Obama. That to me was something that I couldn't help but view as having a racist undertone. And a lot of people say, well, we had all this evidence and information, but
Why?
you
But why
know,
racist? It wasn't. It had nothing to do with his skin color. It was simply you can't be a president if you're not born in the country.
right. But that accusation hadn't been levied until we had our first black president. You know, that you weren't born in this country. Now, I think that they look back at 100 years and maybe they said that this guy was born there. But that to me, and again, you can address these each one by one, but I'm just telling you again, we're going with feelings here, my feelings. And again, that wasn't just the one because there was a lot of people who had that argument. So the Muslim ban, and I know that's not the technical term for it, but
You're talking about December 7th, 2015.
yeah, so him deciding that, you know, we're going to halt and freeze all immigration from these countries. Now, when I went to college, I was a political science major. My emphasis was Middle Eastern studies, and I studied it a lot. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for, again, where I'm looking at sensitive groups, minority groups in this country. How is that interpreted? Are we again sort of saying immigrants, Muslims? And again, there's plenty of evidence to substantiate, you know, that he had security reasons, whatever, to make these calls. But let me continue. Stephen Miller, his advisor, and those emails that were discovered about him and some of the groups that he associated with. You know, I would also say that, you know, some of the language in his tweets and stuff that he says when he uses terms like when he refers to Black Lives Matter maybe and uses the term thug. I don't really appreciate. I don't like that term, even though it could be me being overly sensitive. But I'm just ultimately, you know, shithole countries. You know, there was these ideas that were kind of like led me to question sort of. And again, ultimately, you know, I'm just letting you know from an outside perspective. I feel like it's not like these things are just completely fabricated. Sometimes there's these little things that he can look at. And you've got a million other examples, I'm sure, where, you know, his relationship and, you know, Kanye's endorsement and all this stuff, you know, like you said, the CARES Act and, you know, helping, you know, a lot of people were, you know, the prisons are getting filled up. And so he did something about that. He did something about helping individuals and crime reform. And so you've got arguments, but I'm just letting you know from my perspective, you want to say the media just created all this. And to me, there were things that made me go, I don't love that.
All right, you're giving me so many points to respond to. Let me go at it. Number one, the birther movement. It to pin the race card on that is impossible, right? I don't know. You're a political science major. I'm an environmental engineering major. I don't know of a time previously where we had somebody who actually there was valid evidence that they might not have been born in the country, right? I watched the forensic analysis of the Obama birth certificate. It was done in Arizona, and it was on C-SPAN. And the guy conclusively said, it was on C-SPAN. The guy conclusively, this forensic guy said, this is for sure a faked birth certificate. You know, I know Obama went on to go to Punahou High School in Hawaii and went on to go to Occidental College and of course Harvard. But you don't have, you know, you had real evidence there, and the fact that, you know, and this is obviously he was loud about this in 2013. So that's one thing. The Muslim ban, it was not a Muslim ban. It was from countries that were not able to vet their own people, right? He announced this on December 7th, 2015. So, you know, it was in his candidacy. It was not, you know, before he actually took office. You know, Pew Research did, you know, at that time, there were 1.3 billion Muslims in the world. Obviously, it's the fastest growing religion in the world. 14% of those surveyed, and it was a massive sample size, said
I'm familiar with these surveys.
They would not, you know, 14% of Muslims, and it wasn't just these countries. It was all Muslims said they were not opposed to violence against infidels, right? So he was simply saying, look, if we're taking in Somali refugees, if we're taking in people from these countries where there is a clear, radicalization there, we need to put a pause on it till we have a process by which we can ascertain that these are not people who want to kill innocent Americans, right? So I think, it might have felt heavy-handed, but these were decisive things. And I think, I don't think you can, and I think the problem is that the sound bites that get pulled from these pieces, from shithole countries, this gets pulled into a really quick meme, when in reality he said it in some sort of broader context, right? And all of these things got blown out of the water by CNN, MSNBC. A lot of these pundits just kind of ran with the misinformation, in a place that I don't think put us to any sense of clarity on what he really said. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I and again, it's like people, they hate how quickly that term is thrown around, right? You're racist, because you said this or said or thought this, or and they hate the finality of it, and it's just like boom, that's it. Your character's stained. I've called you racist, and maybe that card is something that's pulled too soon,
Absolutely.
and far too often in this country.
Mean, they're calling African Americans racist who support Trump, and it's like, I think that we have a rise of so many Black conservatives who are somewhat protected from those allegations, and so they're able to actually parse policy, and they're able to champion these ideas because any white person is getting shut down when they're just talking about raw issues. I mean, I understand I understand the civil rights movement, as it were, but I honestly believe that Martin Luther King Jr., were he alive today, would be a staunch Republican. I'm a strong believer in a lot of the things that Thomas Sowell says. I don't see, we have 15% interracial marriage in this country right now. We have, and it's growing. I have not seen this racial divisiveness until post 2009. In the years, there's always stereotypes. I would say there's more of a class stereotype. I think seeing a white woman with cornrows, tattoos, and piercings, and kind of potty talking her kids around, I'm going to have a judgment of that person. And I think what we see is a lot of class stereotyping, but I don't think I'm not seeing racial stereotyping to the same degree. Now, I'm sure there are incidents, but for every incident, we're also really trying to create this narrative so much. And I wish more people on the left would call out somebody like Jussie Smollett for staging this, and now it's been identified that there was some relationship between Kamala Harris and Cory Booker as they were trying to pass this bill, and Jussie Smollett doing, I didn't believe it when he said these guys were wearing a MAGA hat in February in Chicago. If you're not wearing a beanie, you've got frostbite on your ears. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not buying this whole narrative. And I wish, the notion of crying wolf with racism is the most dangerous thing, because where there are real allegations, those don't put forward.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, if you've got enough people crying wolf, then the real allegation of racism, whether it's through a labor law situation that you could be involved in, or just somebody who flat out is disrespecting an African American, I think it hurts all of those cases. So each of these situations that gets blown way out of proportion, and we're eulogizing and making such huge martyrs of pretty unsavory folks that got caught in a situation that, yeah, maybe the police officer shouldn't have used force. But all of those, I want to see them through to their legal conclusion. I want justice to be served. And I don't see, the genesis of all of the unrest started on May 25th in 2020. It was on the heels of people being really worked up over COVID. And we look at it and we go, okay, you know, could it really have been a racial crime? Why did the media try to hide that Derek Chauvin and George Floyd had known each other for years? Because when you have that level of multi-year familiarity between people, the racism argument starts to die.
Well, I think, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that, at least in terms of the police issue, is that messaging, right? We're talking about messaging. Well, defund the police. Like, that was just a horrible message for what I think that many Americans could say that we'd like to see some reform. And when I saw a lot of these, you see these videos and they're out there and they're happening, and it's unfortunate. And it's, it's to all different people, where sometimes, I see where the cops could have done better, that they had a bad day that day. And I don't always necessarily see that this person's racist or they intended it, but I say to myself, is this the best that we can do? What are the ways that we can make improvements and come from a positive situation? But I think we have to admit that there is corruption, like there is in anything. And that some of these, what we may have is that rather than, getting rid of the bad eggs, but that the cops are in a tough position to sort of rat out their brothers in arms, or to stand in line and say, these bad apples need to get out of here. Or cops that get let go, they go to another nearby city and they end up doing this stuff. I mean, we see these people that are involved, some of them have a history of write-ups and complaints and things. And so rather than get lost in this notion of, well, he did it because he's racist, maybe, which I'm not quite sure how we get improvement, people then get on either sides of that, instead of saying, well, what can we come together to make improvements so that we see less of this? And I think and to go even further,
jurisdiction thing's a great idea. That would be a solution right away.
Right. Well,
I mean, we have a sex offenders list. You can't move out of state if you're a sex offender. If you're a bad apple in a police department, you do the same thing. I would be for that, but I'm not for defunding the police. And luckily, our city council did not make those choices.
Sure.
One of the reasons I told people to vote for Georgette Gomez of those two candidates for the 53rd.
Right, and I think you'll even see amongst communities that are of that are really diverse, that someone looking for more police protection and more police, not less. And
Absolutely.
I thought Sam Harris talked a lot about his idea and his notions of these, and that one of the basis of a free-flowing, free civil society is an effective, police force. And so I think that at times we needed to have a little bit better messaging, and instead of taking, what's funny is that Trump seems to be able to take these really aggressive stances and they go, but when the left sort of take aggressive stances, they don't seem to work. And maybe what we need to go back to is, if Trump is to lose, let's say, you don't have to admit that he's gonna, but if he does, what would you say the key reason, and excluding fraud, what would be the key reason why he didn't win? Excluding fraud and everything else. Why? What do you think was the key issue?
I mean, look, I've never seen such meteoric uptick in every demographic. I mean, 12% of Latinos voted for him in 2016, and close to 40% voted for him this time around.
A lot more did, yes.
It's insane. So so I think in a lot of ways, media distrust is even lower than Congress distrust.
Sure.
And I can't say, I would have to say it was because the media, the way that they would paint the picture, the low information voter says, well, things were going along great. The economy was going along great, but this final year of Trump's presidency was chaos. And if Trump is to be equated with Corona and these fallouts, I think a low info voter that doesn't realize it was actually a reaction to Trump could say, all right, well, let's vote for the other guy. The other guy's been around for a long time and that's all they know. But I mean, I'm talking about somebody who's, barely skimming the surface of the truth.
Presumably before COVID, it looked like he was a shoo-in. I mean, all the indicators were that he was really strong.
He still was. I know you're going to disagree with me, but I think he still was. I think we still. I still.
No, I know. I get that.
I mean, and largely when we get into the fraud stuff, which I want to do, the largely the way I have seen on a macro level, because these things are a black box, you have to look at it outside. An anomaly is cause for inspection, right? Only in these swing state counties, urban centers where he actually needed to win, he got 25% more than Hillary's vote. And in the safe bets like Maryland, like Seattle, in those he actually did equal to Hillary or worse. Okay, so it's if the election is a taking of the pulse of the entire nation, it's statistically impossible for those things to happen, right? So and we're gonna, I mean, that's got to be our driving main topic as to why we're not at a place where we're going, all right, we're conceding this thing. Because
and I hear that, and
there's too much data. We have to because if you thought that, look, if Russian collusion was the thing that I had so many friends that we were speaking policy differences about Trump versus Clinton through 2016, and then no sooner did the Russian collusion narrative infect the mainstream media that it was simply like, well, Manafort was a bad guy. He chose a bad guy, and it was conversation over. No more talking politics with so many of my close liberal friends, and that was really annoying to me. And then I had to wait for 2 years of a Mueller investigation, and then I was like, listen, if you're going to hang all of this Russian collusion narrative on no evidence, and Adam Schiff saying he was in a skiff and he's going to tell us the information, and it turns out they were all bluffing. All of those folks were bluffing. Well, at least we actually have real evidence. We have really something to go on that shows, all that talk about election interference. And here we are saying, oh, well, we're all on the up and up. President-elect Joe Biden, just take it. We're moving forward. We've got a transition team.
Let me give you my 2 cents, and then we can move to the fraud stuff, and we can talk about that 100% and the voting security and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In my opinion, had Trump taken a different approach with
COVID,
the coronavirus, I believe he would win in a landslide, in my opinion.
What should that approach have been?
Okay. I believe, like what he does with a lot of things, and it can be very effective, is making wedge issues. And I felt like he made a wedge issue a little bit in the coronavirus. Now, early on, I was very much like, okay, we need like a wartime president who's coming in and is going to, all right, Ford and GM, we're going to take over, and we need ventilators and we need this. And my friends were like, well, no, but he also tried to let the market produce and to work, rather than taking a top-down approach. Let the states handle their individual things. I'm not going to mandate masks. I'm going to, if you need assistance, I'm going to give you, support here and support there. I was calling for even stronger, but my friends were like, look, you can't do that. You can't
you wanted the Defense Production Act. I mean, he was able to do
instantly.
But you saw that he was able to get it done with these public-private partnerships out the gate. I
mean, and we also saw
to LabCorp, to Walgreens, to General Electric. I mean, everybody was there at these daily news briefings. I mean, I've never seen such action. I mean, I thought most people saw an executive operate.
Right, and I think early on a lot of people did. But here's where he lost me, was when, in an effort to what some people quote as being exuding confidence, there was a sort of a downplaying of it. And again, I'm just telling you what I heard, and maybe this is through my Trump derangement syndrome. But I'm just telling you, what I saw, which was we're going to be opened up back soon, and this thing's going to turn around, and before we know it's going to be gone. And then there was a hesitancy to endorse the masks, whereas I just felt like he could have had a George W. Bush 9/11 moment where he comes down, he sort of drops everything and says, look, this is going to be really tough. And
You're
I
talking
can't.
about a media from 20 years ago.
Right, but what I'm just saying is that now you can blame everything on the media if you want to, and that's an approach. And fake news, it is a real thing, okay? And I have a problem with mainstream media too. But Trump is not the conciliatory, sort of opened, I think if he would have said, look, there's hard times ahead, and we as Americans need to come together instead of saying the virus is fake and the mask isn't good and there's treatments they're not letting me do. And there was an attempt, I think, to sort of again draw some lines that I didn't think needed to be drawn. And I wish that it had just been more, this is sort of the reality of the situation. It's going to be hard, but we'll get through this together. And I felt it was like, oh, it'll be disappeared. Stop the testing. No more testing. We need less numbers. And there was his free flowingness and his sort of gregarious nature that there were times where I was like, if he had spoken a little more somberly and solemnly and presented it in a certain way and said, look, everyone's got to wear masks. Don't resist businesses that are asking you to wear a mask. Wear a mask. Now, he came down later down the road, but even still, it was, oh, Biden's wearing the biggest mask I ever seen. And,
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a little bit your TDS. The mask study, the CDC themselves laid out a mask study. Early days, people
we're
were
talking about Trump, not the CDC. His message.
But the CDC themselves, look, the mask to me is an element of submission. I will see somebody take off their own mask to yell at somebody who's not wearing a mask right here in downtown San Diego, obviously not caring about their own, bodily fluids being exchanged. It's a notion of moral superiority. I'm right, you're wrong.
It didn't have to be that way, though. It didn't have to be that way. I think it became that way.
I'm going to show you my mask that got me a lot of love around San Diego here.
Oh my God.
My mask, this is my mask equivalent of a MAGA hat. And, I got people hating on me as I wore it around Little Italy in the gas lamp district.
But you were okay with that. You knew that was coming.
Yeah, well, for sure. But listen, I don't think, I think there was reason to believe I would see Nathan Fletcher and Wilma Wooten get up here every day and give people their 2 cents on what was happening here in San Diego. And one thing that really frustrated me was they would show all these case counts in a downloadable spreadsheet every day, and they would have every zip code, and they would say cases per 100,000. Okay, not every zip code has 100,000 people in it. Okay, there are some with far fewer.
And I get that.
And then they would do cases per 100,000. So if it was a 10,000 person zip code, they would have 75 cases within that zip code. And then at the bottom, cases per 100,000. And then at the bottom, they would go ahead and sum the number that was inflated to get it to the 100,000 scale. And they would just sit there, and I would respond, and I would say, guys, this is a complete lie. You can't do cases per 100,000 and then put it in the summation column. That's not how many cases there are. Today, there are 895 deaths as a result of COVID over the last 9 months. I can't find anywhere a histogram that shows which ages died. And by all accounts, the flu is completely gone. So for people to believe that there's something bogus about the coronavirus is understandable. I mean, we're smart people. We're looking at this data and we're going, look, you can scare us all you want, and we're about to go purple tier into a whole new lockdown. And it just seems super disingenuous to continually beat this drum at all the right times. And then, oh, Biden's elected and 5,000 people on a block. And then, oh, but we got an uptick in cases. It feels very manipulative, and it feels like the coronavirus is being used to do something further and far more nefarious. And I support people who have those beliefs. I know it sounds conspiratorial to you, but I think it's the reality.
and to question the means in which is the best strategy to deal with the coronavirus, I think is fair game. And again, you could say that it didn't make a difference, that Trump's approach, because, shutting down, China, transportation from there, he had some sticking points. I didn't like that they threw Obama's thing out. And I still don't know what Pence does being head of the coronavirus task force. But in my opinion, because here's the thing, it's mostly affecting, our older generation, those 70 and older, and those people vote. And you can say that had no impact in the election at all. But I just think that there was a way that sometimes I want to see a little softness from Trump. And I never do.
That's the feeling thing, man. That's the feel. I mean, look,
I'm a bleeding heart liberal.
Just
Mike,
don't
come
like
on.
him purely on tonality. Some people just don't like that he's brash. And like I said,
words do matter, though, Mike. They do matter. What the president says matters.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think it's okay to judge the president on what he says, and I think it's okay to defend him on his policies. But I think it's okay to judge him on what he says. I just, and here, let's do something. Let me tell you 5 things that I like about Trump.
You actually like about him? All right, let's start.
I like about Trump. Are you ready for this? Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Number 1, I like that he attacked his own party and attacked the media. The media in the United States is a big freaking problem. It's corporate media, and there's not enough open ideas. You're sort of regurgitating the same thing out there. And so there was a truth to his fake news statement, which I think actually Hillary Clinton said first. But yes, 100%. I feel that. Attack the media. The media, by and large, is bad. And I hate that stories that were big, they just disappear. I remember, in Obama, the Syrian conflict was a huge thing, and then they just disappeared from us.
Yeah.
I used to hear it every day about what was going on in there, and then poof, gone. So number 2, I think had he sold America a little bit more on the end goals on his trade war with China, I could see some value in having that fight with him, that clearly China was doing things as a bad actor intentionally, from counterfeit to who knows what. And I think to engage in a trade war with them, you could make the argument is something of value that benefits America, right? Number 3.
Right. Okay.
I also enjoyed the fact that there were no new wars, that he wasn't really beating the war drum.
Even fewer, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
He didn't get sucked into Syria.
Right. No, and so and then and I'll and I may get some flack for this, but I thought that it wasn't unreasonable for him to request that while refugees are waiting for their status, that they wait in Mexico rather than being released into the United States.
Okay. All right.
I think that's not something that's unreasonable to wait outside of the United States to go through this process. And that was something that he went through, that he did. I also think that, let me see, there was one other thing that I wanted to touch on. What he did with the prescription drugs. I'm good with that. I wanted more, but I'll give him credit for that. So there were wins.
Why do you think Pfizer announced the vaccine after Biden was announced?
Well, there's other ones too. But so what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm not here, and I had problems with Obama and issues that I didn't like that he did. So I'm not here just to say everything that Trump did was terrible. And in truth, when he won, even though it wasn't my candidate, I really felt like, shit, democracy worked. Like, the Republican Party didn't want this guy. The powers that be didn't really want him. And yet people came out and voted. A guy who had no political connections was able to go and run and win and beat a political powerhouse like Hillary Clinton. And even though
more efficacy and do things that actually help the nation.
Well, that we can discuss. But I'm just saying is that I'm just trying to tell you is that it's not binary with I try to look at what Trump says and does. And there are things that
and that's more nuance that I get from you when it's merely URL slinging, right? Somebody throws an article from the Federalist, it gets answered with an article from the Economist.
Right.
somebody throws something from red state and it gets answered by, you know, something from the Atlantic. Who's
And I'm
gone
always looking for
far back
something from the Epoch Times or Breitbart just to say
just to
here.
see what's being said on the other side, as I do.
Well, and
I
also to
watch
cite
Lemon and
them.
Cuomo and all their,
Yeah, right. And then
you
to
know,
cite
Matt.
them so that they go, here, look, this isn't just MSNBC. It's over here as well. But you know, that's
Well,
why I thought. Go ahead.
so prescription drugs transparency, that's huge, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because that's, you know, how you solve healthcare is to solve the cost of healthcare. You can't have a third, even in the absence of Medicare for all, you can't have this third party payer system where people are getting what they really need, right? That's just not going to work, and that's why you know, Obamacare can't stand. It's not even standing on the three legs. He got rid of the, you know, he took a chip away at the freedom aspect of it, of don't penalize me. So I think that was a real key thing. Now, obviously, he didn't see that through to completion, but you've got crazy. I mean, look at how much he's been quagmired by the resistance. I mean, you had, you know, 2 years of resistance from the media with Russian collusion, and then a Democratic House that came in and just, you know, had pitchforks for him. There was not a lot of working together. That's why this whole notion of trying to push unity on us for people who still haven't accepted the results of the 2016 election is really hard for us. And we're going, no way, not a chance.
And so for me, and we can talk about that as well. So for me, I never felt like what happened in the election in 2016 somehow meant that his election was illegitimate. But, and we talked about this with the racist things. Let me tell you where I saw a little bit of smoke, okay? You can talk about Manafort and you can say, this is sort of anecdotal information, you know, sharing polling information encrypted and some of his connections with, you know, Russian businessmen who had connections to Putin, the Trump Tower meeting, what happened there, also the WikiLeaks and Stone and Trump's connection there, and Papadopoulos' connection. And so I said from day one, once I became aware of Hurricane Crossfire, I said to myself, Jesus, this is real serious. And Obama better have had his ducks in a row, and there better have been sufficient evidence to justify this surveillance, because it was not something that is just you do willy-nilly. And the problem too is with Democrats is that we went from questioning our intelligence agencies with Iraq to sort of now using them as a sword against Trump, which is fraught with problems. But one thing's for certain is Obama never weaponized any of that information. He never brought it up during the election. He never said, well, we've got information that, you know, Trump may be colluding with the Russians and that there's people who are connected to WikiLeaks who are connected to Trump. He never brought that up. And in fact, Comey's little bombshell about still being investigated for emails wasn't that great either. But he didn't bring it up. He never mentioned it. And in fact, he shared the intelligence briefings with Trump, and he brought him into and showed him, you know, everything. He didn't use the information.
He didn't even tell Trump that he was under investigation.
Right,
and they got Manafort. I mean, Manafort, they got him on FARA, right? They got him for foreign agent registration, right?
Right.
And I mean, you know, ostensibly, you could make the same case against John Podesta and Tony Podesta, right? FARA.
Well,
I mean,
it was also,
or now we should be investigating Biden for Logan Act violations. For reaching out to foreign leaders during a transition period, the same thing that they pinned on Flynn. I mean, if you really believe in fairness, then you've got to look at these things with, if the shoe was on the other foot, you know, would this hold water? And that's just simply not the case.
But to call it a coup is just not fair. There was never any attempt to. Now, the weird thing would have been had they actually found something really scary, what they might have done at that stage. But let's remember this.
At which stage are you calling it a coup? At which stage?
Well, I'm just saying the Republicans and Trump always as a coup, like the deep state was trying to stop me from becoming president. And what it was is there was information, and it wasn't all the dossier that they were receiving. And it was like, okay, you know, to start an investigation in the FBI doesn't require lock solid evidence. It requires some information. And Trump's campaign was a little disorganized. He wasn't using the standard people, and he may have had some people that were next to him that had some shady connections. And that's not unique.
But why would they withhold exculpatory information? They had that as well.
Well, so they did have some of that. But what I'm trying to tell you is that Stone and Trump communicating and Stone and WikiLeaks communicating is a big deal. That's suspicious, is it not?
Okay. Listen, where does Stone knowing about? I mean, it's what cracks me up is the things that the Democrats go nuts about are when the truth gets brought to light, right? Like Democrats champion Snowden for whistleblowing the NSA,
and I did too.
But somehow the fact that and you know that Guccifer did not hack to get the WikiLeaks email, and I've read all the Hillary Clinton emails, right? The notion of knowing that might drop or that information is out there, but not actually soliciting it from the campaign, that cannot be used to. I mean, the charade or the big production that they made out of Stone's arrest felt so heavy-handed, and that felt like the beginning of this totalitarian march that has only increased since then.
But
that's what us conservatives feel like,
right? And that's fair. And I think that there's a lot of look, like I said, this had I was worried about the investigation that Trump was going to be doing and looking into this. He appointed his own special prosecutor to look into Hurricane Crossfire, and what did he come up with? What did the Republican Senate come up with? He said that there was a FISA issue, but other than that, he felt like starting the investigation was within the bounds of what the FBI protocols were. And it's like, we can't forget that, Sessions recused himself.
Well, that was stupid. He didn't have anything to do with it.
Right, but he was appointed, right, by Trump. McCabe.
Yeah, he gave up a Senate seat.
A Trump appointee, again, decided to say, okay, I'm going to appoint Mueller, a lifelong Republican who up until this point, most Republicans probably liked, and said, look into this, look into Russian interference and look into it. This wasn't the Democrats doing this. This was his own people doing this.
I think if you watch the Mueller testimony, you realize that was the most delegated thing ever. It's like the guy is sitting there and shuffling through papers. It's like he seemed like he wasn't even privy to his own report.
Yes, but the idea here is that I think what we can say is, and what Republicans said is, collusion was never proven, 100%. But, and I listened to Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald who talk about this too, and they say it's a 100% a hoax and all this other kind of stuff. And I listened to that, but good Lord, there was just a lot of unusual things that took place during the 2016 election. And there seemed to be some just unusual things that were going on. And ultimately nothing was found. But again, how can you pin the Dems on Mueller and McCabe? Why tell Sessions to grow a pair, have McCabe not appoint an independent, investigator? I mean, how can you say the Dems created this? Because here I am, I'm sitting back and I'm like, what the frick is going on? I don't know any of this stuff before.
I don't know. I mean, I want to trust Sessions. I'm a little bit skeptical because he was the very first one to jump forward and endorse Trump from the Republican Party.
Sure, he started.
My feeling was by doing that, he was, insurance policy number one, right? To be able to do that. So the other way to look at it, you're looking at the inside out of the Russian investigation, right? The Russian collusion narrative, right? The other way to look at it is from the outside in. There's nothing that Trump's policies do that's going to benefit Russia, right? Trump's not interested in selling 20% of our uranium to Rosatom. Trump is certainly not interested in engaging in a proxy war in Syria. He showed that and he proved it. Trump in seeking energy independence for us is really taking away some of the lifeblood for the Russian people because they're unable to charge us the prices that they've been able to charge us for gasoline.
A lot of sanctions against them.
So if you look at it from outside in, what potential quid pro quo could there have been with Russia? And then furthermore, now we get to the end of the election. I know none of this stuff gets covered, but I hope you're looking through multiple publications. Why would the wife of the Moscow mayor pay 3.5 million to Hunter Biden? Why would there seem to be actual relations between nefarious Russian sorts with the Democrats? It's this projection that we go crazy on, and we see this projection and we go, hold on a second, that's not at all what we're up to. But in fact, it's now pointing that it's something that you guys are up to.
Well, and here's the thing. If it's out there, by God, go and get it. Go and lock them down and get it. And I said that from the beginning. And Trump had been saying this whole time, my God, no one, in my opinion, had used the Department of Justice and the FBI with such fervor as Trump has. And it's like, deliver the goods to me. And some people say, well, he didn't have enough time. He didn't have enough time. It's like, if it's out there, deliver the goods. Deliver the goods. If you've got information,
I think Trump should have done a better. I think he was too trusting to let so many holdovers from the Obama administration. I think he should have done more of a clean house effort. I know it's really hard to staff up.
Why did he want the secret meeting with Putin with no one there? Like, so we'd have this private conversation with Putin, remember? And then they wanted to get the interpreter to speak, and there was a court case about that. Some of this, is sort of, I'm sitting back here. I didn't invent Russia. Again, I'm not the Democrats, but I'm reading in the news and I'm seeing this and I go, well, geez, Mueller's not a liberal guy. Hell, he defended the NFL. Like he seems like a prudent individual. But maybe I should have been doubting everyone. Maybe I should have been more skeptical of all that from the beginning. But it's like, I'm sitting back and trying to figure this stuff out. I mean, we know, now they question how much the Russians were involved and how much of an impact it made. And I think from his perspective, it was always like, they're trying to steal my election from me. And I never looked at it that way. I just was receiving information and trying to make a determination. So what it looked like is that from a liberal point of view, for my liberal friends who refused to even acknowledge that Russia wasn't 100% in, and had Mueller gone after the finances, he would have found what he needed, whether it was through loans or whatever.
A $40 million investigation that's that protracted is a disservice to the people, because all of that was going on and nobody found out about any of these other policies, opportunity zones, First Step Act, right to try, none of these great things. I mean, I talked to people here in the biotech community who had no knowledge of right to try. It's like, that's a complete boon for their industry. Clinical trials and FDA approvals are the biggest hurdle to go over. I mean, you think it's hard to create a drug? Try getting it approved. This fast tracking of things for people who are on their deathbed was a huge boon. And it's something that crosses all partisan proclivities. And here we are totally ignoring it. So we just feel like we were really kind of chinched out of all of the efficacy of the Trump administration. And now here we are looking at, people who are excited about him for a second term, all races, all genders. I mean, we have transgenders in the Republican Party who are, out there for the MAGA rallies. This whatever intersectionality you want to throw at the MAGA movement, it's there. And to your point on COVID, however you thought he should have behaved, when I do an anecdotal survey of people who have kind of crossed the aisle and come on to my side, right? And I say, well, what was the moment? And they say, because the rest of my life stopped and I had an opportunity to see him in his executive capacity, responding to the data that he was being given during COVID and making decisions and deploying the assets that we needed. I knew that he was doing everything in his power, and I saw the way the media was still taking him down. And that was the moment I crossed the aisle and I said, I'm with Trump. And that is there are other instances that gave people their red pill moment, but that is by and far above all other things, the moment in which people were really able to sit there and pay attention, to grab news from everything from C-SPAN to Fox News to Newsmax to, all the way to the left. And they were able to put these things out there and they were able to say, okay, Trump is doing the best he can. and I'm seeing it. So maybe it hit you because you were, deep in TDS, but it was an awakening for a lot of people, and I think it still is.
Do you remember? You remember when Hurricane Katrina hit and
Yeah.
George W. Bush was in office, and I
Mhm.
remember there was this big attack on the fact that I think the guy who was the head of FEMA at that time didn't have a lot of experience, and some people were critical of the response that it took, I know how many days for water to get down there and all this other kind of stuff. But it seemed like even for the people who had, were upset about the lack of government response. I just remember that image of George W. Bush. I'm no fan of George W. Bush, mind you, but I remember that image of him coming down there, and these young kids like ran up to him, and he gave them a hug and was like, you're going to be okay, and we're going to get through this. It was that that symbolism, that moment that I wanted to see from Trump, but instead it was kind of like he didn't. There was no tonality change. It was just
What
him being the
what
same.
what media would cover that if it even happened?
He was having press conference. I mean, he took over those press conferences because he knew that they were getting good ratings. And I didn't see this. It seemed like more of the same. I'm drawing lines where lines didn't need to be drawn. And again, in my opinion, amongst a few other things, I think the McCain thing may have cost him Arizona, but these are my opinion. But
Well,
that to me, I think he would have sailed. He would have sailed
well,
right through.
McCain was a big part of. McCain was a big part of his takedown, right? He was a big part of shopping
I mean,
the
defend
Steele
that.
dossier, right? And I think
But I mean,
a lot of
defend his
people on the
statements.
right would look at McCain as, a deep stater who
Okay.
when you really get into the notion of what has been wrong with the country is, ironically, it's like the WWF, right? Like where you go, okay, one of these guys is supposed to lose and one of these guys is supposed to win, and it's planned. And you start to realize that many of these Republicans are kind of designed to be the punching bag for the left, and they're actually working together towards the same goals. Their agendas are equally corrupt, and I say take them all out. I mean, if new shit comes to light that takes out Republicans as well as Democrats, I'm all about it. I'm for truth. I'm
Me
not a
too.
team player to the point where my guy gets hit versus your guy gets hit.
Agreed.
When people throw me, oh, look at this, random election fraud incident in whatever. I mean, so long as it's of the same magnitude, I say take them out. Fraud is fraud, right? So I don't.
And everyone wants transparency. At least I do.
Do they? You
I
do.
want
Well, I mean,
transparency.
you're a rarity. I'm not seeing that from other members of your party or other members
Look,
of people who support Biden.
look. I mean, hell, there were people I knew who wanted to leave the United States after Trump won, and I criticized them. But fundamentally, we have to believe in our electoral process as being legitimate. And if it's
Have to.
not that, so okay, but that being said, I disagree with him not sharing the intelligence information with Biden. To me, that's a low. Even Clinton shared with W. Bush when the Florida recount was going on and was sharing information. So there's times where I'm saying, look, you have every right to file any lawsuit you want to go after any recount that you want to do, and use every avenue at your disposal to show this voter fraud that gave, in theory, Biden the election. Go for it. It should be, put a light to it. You know what I mean? Clear it out. Let's see it. But I don't
If there's evidence that, I mean, slip of the tongue, Biden did say we have organized the most extensive election fraud or operation in the history. I mean, maybe that was accidental. I have to believe that the Holy Spirit works in really interesting ways. Okay. So maybe he didn't need to share intelligence with him because he knew that Biden was already privy to this information.
I just there's times when it just seems like Trump it's really about, sometimes it's about Trump more than, I just don't know what's going to happen.
The guy doesn't take a salary. The guy's the only president in history whose net worth has gone down since sitting in the Oval Office. I mean, the guy is, I can't believe that he takes the slings and arrows from your side and does it as gracefully as he does. I mean, I'm telling you.
Mike, graceful. That's a term for, that's a unique term for him. What about the emoluments clause? Okay. And him not divesting from his businesses and still being an active partner in his business while running the presidency. Like, you don't have any issue with that? What about like stopping off at like his Scottish like golf course unnecessarily and staying at his properties and doing all this golf stuff where he lambasted Obama for golf, and this guy's out in the course right now. And so let's play fair.
But Obama's playing on the taxpayer dollar. Sure, Trump has an $80,000 golf cart that probably is a necessity from national security standpoint, but you can't make, all right, back to emoluments clause. Where have we had a president that had 3.2 billion net worth coming into the Oval Office, right? He's not an active participant. Like, he hasn't made, you're using this idea that because he's got a $400 million note with a bank, that somehow if any of those investors are foreign entities, that he, that he's beholden to them. I don't know.
But if I buy a condo in a Trump Tower and I'm from Saudi Arabia, Trump knows that. It's not like there's a secret blind wall there that keeps that from him. If I want to get close, I can spend money at his properties. I can do stuff, and he becomes aware of that. So you could say, well, I trust him. And I feel like he would never do that. But
why you would have to have proof that he would do so. If you think that he is in any way leveraging, I mean, aside from the fact that the Mar-a-Lago initiation fees have gone up, they probably had to. I mean, you reduce demand by increasing pricing, right? You in some ways push away demand. It's what the market will bear. I don't see those things as conflict of interest. I think if you're going to go down that route, then you ought to look at all these people in Congress that make $174,000 a year, and all of a sudden they're worth $20 million. I had to do a financial disclosure. I couldn't even put mutual funds on the fd.house.gov website because they wanted to know what the actual hold. I was like, I don't know what the investment thesis of that mutual fund is, besides, small cap, mid cap, whatever it is. I don't know what their actual holdings are underneath, but I have to go and show you every single ticker symbol that's sitting under there. Meanwhile, you have people that are making huge bets, making huge investments in voting systems.
And that's,
it's
wrong.
unconscionable. So
that's wrong. And getting rid of insider trading stuff in Congress and all that stuff is way wrong. Okay. And I think that's something that if Biden were to come in and try to get rid of some of this corruption and some of the money that these people are getting, maybe term limits, whatever.
Dude,
what do you mean?
You can't say Biden and get rid of corruption in the same sentence.
Well, what I'm saying is, again, I'm not saying that he stands for that. What I'm saying is if he did, that might be some things.
He'd have to start at home. He would have to start at home. I mean, do you know the mechanics of the Burisma deal?
Yeah. I mean, look.
You do?
Yes, of course.
1.5 billion to these guys?
Yeah, but
1.5 billion? The Ukrainian people have pitchforks out for Biden and his son. The Ukrainian people are enraged. They're like, no way, dude. You're going to tell us that you routed Russian gas a kilometer into Slovakia and back to us, and you charged us 1.5 billion more for it? What's up with all the Democrats that are anti-fossil fuels and their kids are invested in these gas companies with no experience? It doesn't make any sense, man.
Okay, so but again, it's like, I don't want to deal in whataboutisms. Okay,
that's not what about. It's a real thing.
No. I am bringing up something about Trump, and then you want to bring up something about Biden.
Well, you went to emoluments clause. You went to the notion of
your
private entity enterprise with your office, and is there ever a situation where one would influence the other? if you have an influence, if there's something that could happen, I mean, look, there's not a simple way to have an absolute Chinese firewall. It obviously is going to be scrutinized. I don't think that there's anything.
If they had a blind trust, Mike, it would have taken away that question right then and there. Much like showing his taxes, these things would have moved stuff away.
You can't run an active hotel through a blind trust.
No, just you can. If Trump doesn't have access to the information and doesn't see what's going on, because he doesn't do the day-to-day shit anyway.
Of course
so
not.
It's like, so that's what I'm saying. Just here's the thing, okay? And one of the other reasons why a lot of people were able to spin this notion of, well, he's rich, Trump, so he's not bought by anyone. He's free. He can do whatever he wants. He's already rich, so he can make policies, and he doesn't need to worry about what's going to happen after he leaves office because he's already rich. That story to me was just, it reminded me of Silvio Berlusconi from like Italy. I'd seen this story before about the rich guy.
You cannot compare.
But what I'm saying is the rich guy, the tycoon coming in, and because he's rich, that somehow means that there's going to be no corruption, that he's not in there trying to like, I mean,
it just means, look, I think he should do what he said is do a 5-year moratorium on lobbying after leaving.
I agree.
After leaving do term limits. And then after you're done,
I agree.
Do a 5-year moratorium on lobbying.
I agree.
You can't turn around and get a job. You can't leave the military and go straight to Raytheon. Look, and it's hard, to do, right? Because the military, the guys aren't making that much money. They're at the prime of their life. They're coming out as a full bird. You're coming out, as a general. I mean, this is your opportunity to make your final, net worth.
And I don't have judgment on that.
You, so that you go.
I get that.
I mean, it has to be balanced.
Right.
So
I agree.
Cases, I fail to see people put a clear case for Trump's business dealings in changing any of his policy positions. There's not a place where I think you can really, pin the tail on the donkey and say, look, this is a situation where he would have done X, from a policy standpoint, but he did Y to benefit himself. Because you know what? You've already in so many ways, you've already discounted that claim out of the gates with all that he's done to give back and say, look, this is not about me. This is about you guys.
Let me address something else too that he ran on that I thought was going to go one way and went the other. When he was talking about draining the swamp, right? He was talking about draining the swamp. I said to myself, all right, so we're going to get big business and special interests out of government. But that wasn't really the swamp he was talking about. The swamp he was talking about was eliminating, like you say, the size and scope of all these federal jobs and the deep state. That's the swamp he wanted to drain. He wanted to not fill positions. He wanted to cut back and cut here. And where I was like, wait a minute, you got Rex Tillerson being your Secretary of State. You got more people from banks and corporations in your administration than maybe any of the other ones. And so I thought the swamp draining was going to be this way, but it wasn't. It was the other way. And so I just was disappointed by that. Like,
well, you're going to have, look, you can't put somebody who has a promising resume and a PhD into these positions. Somebody like Rex Tillerson, you when you're dealing with
Goldman Sachs guys who he rips Hillary for, you know what I mean? It's like, come on, man.
Look, we say politics is downstream from culture, but in a lot of ways, geopolitics is downstream from energy. You can't divorce the two. The notion of energy and energy independence and energy interrelations is, in a lot of ways, it supersedes even other trade, right? So, obviously all these guys, I mean, think of each one of these individuals, whether it was Kelly or Tillerson, who came in and for whatever reason, they're, Bolton, their post-administration expose is, Trump's a loose cannon and Trump's this, Trump's that. You start to realize that, look, all these guys are in on the take. They're in on some kind of grift where they're almost they're almost had their feet held to the fire to say something negative about him on the leave. And I've never, I trusted Kelly. I trusted Tillerson during their tenure. And then, finding out the details of whatever it was that Trump, let them resign or fired them. I had to assume it was because there was some parameter of trust was lost there, and it was an opportunity. It was another landmine for him to step in to make a policy decision that wasn't good for the American people. And I trust that. I mean, I haven't seen any examples of a time where it was simply his ego that drove those decisions. I mean, look at Barr. Barr was on Mark Levin, I think 2 months ago, and I was like, Trump should just use the last 4 minutes of this interview between Mark Levin and Barr, because here's a guy who's been in 3-4 administrations, and it was the most effusive. I have never seen an executive be so tireless, so committed, so open to listening to so many different viewpoints and synthesizing them so quickly. And I was like, if he could just do a 4-minute commercial with everything that Barr said, and Barr's Barr is a very sober, taciturn individual.
Not very charismatic.
Well, he's not charismatic, but that's what you want for the head of the DOJ. He runs justice, and you have to trust that he's going to apply justice fairly, and he's articulate. So for him to give that kind of commendation of Trump with a guy who's seen 4 presidents in action up close and personal, I was like, people need to listen to that.
Okay, so this is what I want, because I told you some things that I liked about Trump. Okay, and just so that I can be like, okay, he's just not a true believer, and whatever Trump does or says, he walks on water. I want you to tell me things
that I don't like about Trump,
that you don't like, that you disagreed with, policy things that he said, things that happened that you wish he didn't.
I wish he was clear about vaccine mandates. My big issue is if he's going, I haven't taken a vaccine since measles, mumps, rubella, right? I was 5 or 7 MMR. I know that there's you've got kids, there's this cocktail of some 60 different vaccines they have to take now. I think it's ridiculous. I think the fact that the vaccine industry is protected, with no liability for their product, I think is unconscionable. And frankly, these vaccine companies, whether it's GlaxoSmithKline or Moderna, when the guy came out and said with the actual mechanics of it, an actual mRNA vaccine, that's something that actually can change your DNA. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy theory about what this vaccine means, but I personally don't want to take a vaccine. I don't want to be held against, I don't want to be held against travel. I don't want to be unemployable. I don't want the not taking of the vaccine to be something that hampers the freedom and the liberty that
he mentioned it like in his campaign, but he never really did anything with it. But he mentioned it a little bit about concerns about vaccines, but he never went after it. So that's one vaccine.
No, he said we're going to have a vaccine soon. He's touting the warp speed creation of the vaccine as a win for the administration. And I think that's fine. I think people who are high risk or afraid, if they want to take that vaccine, that's fine. But this is a my body, my choice moment for me, where I don't, I understand that the infection fatality rate of COVID is maybe 2x of the common flu, but that's not enough for me to take a vaccine. Well, how can we say we have a vaccine with a 90 to 95% success rate when we have a survival rate of over 99.8%? It's ridiculous that we're pushing this thing out to people as like the end all be all. And I don't think Bill Gates has a very good track record on vaccines. I listened to his interview with Rashida Jones and Tony Fauci today. And, I thought it was a whole bunch of malarkey propaganda, frankly. And I don't trust this idea. You can't have a guy who wants his swan song to be, effective depopulation for the purpose of the earth. And I'm not, no. And look, this, it's only a conspiracy theory until we're sitting here on the other side of Auschwitz and going, wow, really?
Okay, that's one. Give me another one.
Okay, so things I like about Biden,
No. Things you didn't like about Trump. Come on, give me some other ones. Give me some other ones so that I feel like, because I'm coming here and I'm saying, look, when the Democrats do things I don't like, call me out on it, and I'm going to stand by it. I'm not going to just. We're not. Look, no one's scoring points here for us today, and neither you or I are running for office right now.
The vaccine.
So I want.
The vaccine is my big thing. I honestly haven't. Look. I've said it before. I think he wears his ties too long. Do I like his tweets? People saying, "Oh, he's tweeting at all hours, and it's a direct conduit to the American people, but he should really send it through some filters." I love that. I absolutely love that. There's nothing I disagree with that. I think he had to bypass the media. I think he just displays a good degree of pugnaciousness. Maybe it's the Irish in me. I love it. I absolutely love it.
But can you agree that him, criticizing McCain's war record and I like soldiers who don't get caught, that you would say that he probably shouldn't have said that, and that was something you would disagree with?
That was in the context of the actual candidacy during the 2016.
Yes. And even after he had died, there were some jabs that he threw in there as well at the man. So I'm just saying, like, I want you to, I guess, the Trump supporter
but this is what you guys do. You want us to concede something we don't like about the guy. I told you. That's it. I'm not going to make something up.
No, that's fine. But it's just, it makes it harder for me to find some common ground, I feel like, with the Trump supporter who basically can find no fault in President Trump. Like, that is just too good to be true. Like, any person, any president makes mistakes. Here's another good example. When he killed Soleimani, right? Which I didn't really have a problem with. I thought I was okay with that. The guy had screwed around in our affairs for a long enough time, and he was not in Iran. He was in Iraq.
We had an embassy attack. We've been through that before.
Sure. So, and a lot of people had problems with it. I didn't. I was okay with it. To me, that's,
okay.
So I was okay with that. But then they had their retaliatory strike, and he tried to say that, the injuries were just headaches, and he was playing down the injuries that took place there. And there are other examples of him sort of speaking without having all the information. And I feel like it's like, if there's this willingness to sort of accept everything that Trump.
The Soleimani thing, that was planned, that those guys were not going to hit those guys. Right.
But there were injuries. People had
they had eardrum blowouts. Yes.
And there were longstanding issues with that. And he made some sort of wisecrack about concussions amongst the military and stuff. I mean, it's there. The Trump people that I connect.
You're playing like a sensitivity card. And if he did have a sensitive moment, they wouldn't have covered it anyway.
Right. But hold on. See, we're sort of moving from whether or not it matters to whether or not people would have cared. Those are two different things. Because again, I don't like to have conversations with individuals about politics, and it moves we move the needle, or we bring up something else. There's whether or not it would have. We're talking right or wrong here. That's what we like to talk about, you and me. What's right and what's wrong? What this person did or that person did. We're talking about this one subject, and so I think for me is. The Trump supporter, I get why people voted for Trump. It's not lost on me that people voted for Obama and then they voted for Trump. I can't, it took me a while, but there were things where I saw, okay, I get it. But at the same time, I feel like they almost said, well, I've got issues, but by and large, there's a big enough swath that I'm good with Trump and I'm staying over here. Or what the liberals are doing is so out of whack to me. Even if Trump's saying crazy stuff, I'm supporting him. But the people who just say Trump's Jesus Christ and he only cares about America,
he's a foul guy, sure.
You know what I mean? That there was never, so I don't like, and people do this even to this day with Obama. I don't like to hold these presidents up as being this mythical figure, because you're right. I was pissed off about Snowden, and I didn't like the fact that Snowden was hoping that Obama was going to come in and there was going to be less surveillance, but there was more surveillance under Obama. And there were other things too. And so I'm not going to, just because he's not the other guy, just say, well, he's just, he can walk on water. You know what I mean? I hate that crap. And by and large, I think if you really analyze the presidency, you say, okay, there's 4 or 5 things. I'm holding on to those, and the rest, yeah, I'm going to take those slings. But these are the important ones. These are the ones I'm going to hang my hat on. And the rest, well, life's not perfect.
I want to ask you about the media malpractice of potentially what this early calling of the election could do, because this is like the issue of the day is going to be if Trump can identify, the use of hammer scorecard, the use of these Dominion voting systems that were flipping votes, some of the real outright scandals of the mail-in voting system, such that these swing states get overturned and the presidency is taken away from President-elect Joe Biden. Don't you think there's going to be a level of chaos that we did not see during the George Floyd riots, and we did not see during any previous domestic moment?
Encouraging electors to vote with their conscience and not with the winner of the state, that worries me. Trying to force this into the House, that worries me. The Dominion thing,
I think that's one of the plays. The House is blue.
Right, but it's based on the states, right? It's based on the individual states.
Yeah, the state legislators could foreseeably say, if they don't believe that their integrity was met through their election process, they could.
But Dominion, isn't that just a QAnon conspiracy theory? And talk about that. Do you consider that Trump is fighting a secret war against liberal pedophilia elites? Are you?
I'm familiar with the moment, but I'm not. I take it as a below ground kind of thesis that probably has a lot of misinformation in it. It had a lot of truthful information in it that people who read those posts were way ahead of it. We were way ahead of Kevin Kleinsmith being the first indictment. That was laid out long before it actually happened, right? So
that stuff is very scary to me.
The fact that has been true on a lot of cases is going to mean it's an information source for a lot of people. But you can't dispute the fact that we've looked at this data. How are the reddest districts gone?
So talk to me about that. This is you. I'm an attorney. And I'm not a math guy. You're the engineer, and so I get some of the stuff. My friends send it to me. The stuff that supposedly reveals that there's irregularities in these votings, right? Okay, so if that's there, right? If that's there, why can't that somehow be used as evidence in a court of law to fix what it is that you want to have fixed? That's what I'm saying. If you got the goods, use the goods. I've heard this theory too, that this was a trap, that Trump laid this trap for these people, and now they're going to get caught. And he knew that the Democrats were going to do
You're talking about the watermark trap?
All this kind of stuff. I've heard that.
I don't subscribe to that.
That we're waiting, and Trump's got a big reveal. Trump's got a big reveal that's going to show all the corruption and all the stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like, if it's there and these statistics are real and they're legitimate, then use them. But I feel like so often it's like full of sound of fury, but signifying nothing. I've got Giuliani over here, doing whatever at the Four Seasons, and these accusations. Most of these judges, many of them Republican appointed, are just throwing these lawsuits out over and over and over again. They're just tossing them.
When we went to bed on election night, we knew that there was going to be a nice lead. The AFL-CIO put out a paper that basically said Trump's going to win on election day, but the mail-in ballots he won't prevail with. Now, what we didn't realize is that we would have, in some cases, not even just more than registered voters, but even more than eligible voting populations in some of these communities worth of mail-in ballots. I was crying about this voter ID has always been my top issue. Every time I get a mailer saying, is it environment? Is it education? Is it military, what are your priorities? There's always a space, and I always write in voter ID because I think it's a fixed system because it's broken. It's fixed in these ways. And I looked at the data. We had tons of candidates here even in California. I think California had tons of fraud. I know it's not a quote unquote swing state, but you had Juan Hidalgo running for the 51st, who, has run, this is his third time running, and he's always on the uptick. And then all of a sudden he gets a drop off. I mean, that guy probably met close to every one of the 800,000 constituents in the 51st, worked his butt off. And he had, with the lockdowns, a lot of people are moving right towards liberty. I was like, there's no way these numbers are right. I am not seeing these numbers being right here in California and in all these other states. And I think it's high time that we get to a blockchain voter ID voting system. It's too necessary.
Would you be in favor of a national ID?
Not a subcutaneous one.
Right. I mean, I have friends.
Real ID. Real ID. We've already bastardized the notion of an ID by giving IDs to people who aren't citizens.
Right. Well, like for instance, a friend of mine brought up that Brazil and 140 million people, they vote because they have the one ID, and the results are found 24 hours later. And it does seem, what would you do?
They're compelled to vote. They have to vote.
Would you be in favor of getting rid of the individual states' sort of ability to conduct the elections as they see fit and just come up with a uniform system?
And do away with the Electoral College?
No. I mean, states have the individual right to say, well, we're going to count mail ballots.
Right. It's part of our federalism. I think there should be something consistent. I mean, it says in the Constitution very clearly that if a state cannot, if the Secretary of State of that state cannot run an effective election, then it can be dismissed. Right. That's in the Constitution. I think we need an election. I think we need parameters that we've never seen this kind of abuse. It took a mail-in ballot system to get here, and maybe this is going to lead us to a new reality. But I honestly don't know if we're going to have, if Biden prevails through this madness, I don't know that we're going to ever have an election that will see Republicans be able to hold office.
But if that were okay, so Trump had his voter fraud committee that he made and when he went into office, and then it just fell apart. It disbanded. And so oftentimes I'm like, okay, you're the stat guy, you're the evidence guy. Show it to me. And sometimes it's like, well, we look at the stats, and it's like, if there is
how would Biden have a 20% bump over Hillary in only the states he had to win, and in some cases a drop on that percentage in the states he didn't need to win? How do you describe? I mean, I went hour by hour with the Wayback Machine, looking at Wisconsin and Michigan and showing how you have for instance, in Michigan, you have John James tracking perfectly with Donald Trump through the day. These are ballots that are coming in from real individuals. And then all of a sudden at night, there will be a dump that just is simply top of ticket Biden to the tune of, hundreds of thousands. It's insane. And then all of a sudden it's like they march on the same, you can see the true voter propensity across the state from the daytime ballots. And then the nighttime ballots just blow Biden way up ahead. The extension that was never really approved in Pennsylvania. I mean, these are abuses of the system.
Right. But but you're not also talking about, and again, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do a whataboutism and voter suppression and things like that. But from
the only things that suppress the polls in this case were people feeling like, oh, there's no way for Trump to win. You're telling me there's a 16-point spread between Biden and him. And then the other thing is, we've never seen social media. Social media did this big razzmatazz after the 2016 election, saying, "Oh, it was these Facebook groups that these Russian guys we're spending money on and getting all these memes out there with Pepe the Frog and God, this is what happened. And then Sundar Pichai gets up there and he goes, they say, so what was the amount spent? And he said $86,000. And I was like, are you kidding me, dude? We're going to believe this narrative, and then you're going to tell me that it was $86,000 spent on these ads? No way. That didn't sway the needle.
So, and like I said from the beginning that Trump's election was legitimate and that Hillary lost that election fair and square for a whole host of different reasons.
Thank God. Some sensibility. Some sensibility. No. So then in the same way, though, we've got record turnouts. I mean, the ballots are floating around just like the sales circulars are. Right, the Vaughn sales circular,
but you didn't
going down the street. They're everywhere. They're being traded like baseball cards.
But it's hard for for guys like me to prove. Well, I have to now prove that fraud isn't there. Isn't that your burden? And I know there's a statistical analysis and whatnot, but then you've also got Republican Secretary of State saying it's legit. Your challengers were in the room just like us. They were watching what was going on.
No, I did not see Republican poll watchers having the same level of access to the polls. I mean, if you're doing signature matching, I mean, that's the whole thing. What is to prevent? I did a whole thing on the 5 categories of election fraud, just because there's so many viral videos going around, and it's sort of like we got to categorize this stuff and think about. Huge systemic fraud, which is actually software related. And then just the notion that you can have a giant dump of ballots that, stupidly were president only. I mean, and this is the first election where we've had, over 5 million ballots as president only. It's usually on the order of 1 million. So, where are these 4 million ballots? I mean, at the end of the day, who is top voting only? Unless you're just in a rush and you're trying to get those things in before the poll count. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
How does the 20 million people in Florida, how are they able to run a full, effective, fair election, and we're stuck at 89% reporting in Arizona?
No, there's problems. There's problems and there's efficiency issues and then there was a lot of bills that the House passed in order to beef this stuff up, but Mitch McConnell wasn't interested in passing any bills regarding that. So there was a move to try to strengthen these systems. And
I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well, and here's the other thing too, is if the Democrats have access to all this, why didn't we get Mitch McConnell out of there? Why not Lindsey Graham? If we lost seats in the House, we didn't carry any state legislatures. We still didn't take back the Senate, even though the polls were saying this and that. So a lot of people were like, well, how could the Dems do so well? And it's like, well, we didn't necessarily do that well. Sure, we got, at least in theory, the big prize right now.
It's not the blue wave that was anticipated.
No, and I agree with that. But in the end, if you're going to say that we had the ability in which to manipulate this, why stop at the presidency? Why not move forward? You know what I mean? Why not get these other areas taken care of as well? And like I said, Trump had 4 years. He had the committee to look into fraud, and they didn't find anything. And there's yet to be any sort of real evidence other than the stuff that you're bringing up right now, which again, I'm not a science guy, but we've not seen legitimate evidence of systemic voter fraud across the nation. We haven't seen it. Where is it?
You better follow this channel, because Derek and I think we're 3 or 4 pieces in to some really compelling stuff. So I think
and rock and roll, get it out there.
All right, we're doing it. Help us get out there. We had Wayne Bickford came into the chat here. And said, "Hey, Democrat, what do you like about Biden?" I think that's a fair question. From what I'm hearing from you, I don't know that there would be much, but I think
no.
Let me
lay it down. Okay.
What do you like about him?
Okay, but again, a lot of this is, and again, I've said this. Unfortunately, I have to vote. There are certain issues that I can't walk away from. Okay. And that forced me to vote for an imperfect candidate. I didn't vote for Biden.
These are your hot issues. These are your must-haves.
Okay. I do not agree in massive tax cuts for the top 1%. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that that enriches the nation. I don't believe in trickle down economics. I don't buy that. I don't believe that. Other people disagree. Very fine economics, people will disagree with that and say that necessarily, we don't know whether or not that helps or not. I disagree. I don't believe in tax cuts for the top 1% do us any good. Okay. Secondly, okay, yeah, no,
we'll table an economic discussion for another time.
Okay. Unfettered deregulation, I also don't agree with. Okay, I don't agree with overregulation, but in my opinion, I'm a pro-environment guy, and I think that
the regulation is not just the environment; that's a small piece of it.
No, I understand that, and there is other, but generally speaking, when I've seen industries get deregulated, it hasn't always lended itself to a positive outcome. Sometimes it has, other times it hasn't. Another thing that I can't get on board with is, well, so let me start talking about positive stuff with Biden. I want more of a proactive approach with addressing the coronavirus. He's issued his plan. Biden put it out there, and many of the things I agree with. I didn't feel like there was at times a national strategy with what Trump was trying to do. I wasn't seeing that there. I didn't see that. Let's see here. What are some other issues? I mean, look.
Biden's mask mandate and 6 weeks of shutdown. You're on board with that?
And you're cherry picking. Some of the issues of that. First off, how can the president even do a mask mandate? Like, we all know the president isn't the king. Is he just going to wave his wand and say, if you don't wear a mask, I'm going to get you? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't agree with that.
Newsom did a mask mandate in June.
Well, okay, he's the governor of California. He can't mandate what people in Kentucky do.
He's the king of California.
Maybe they're so wait. You let me finish here.
Well, you've got a lot of questions to get to. Sheedy's got a question for you too, so go ahead.
Oh, wait. Sheedy is Brian. You know why the nation voted for Obama and Trump. So tell me why 78 million people voted for Biden. Okay. A lot of those issues that I brought up before about Trump, about the nature of Trump, of him and his attack on certain segments of society, like I said, with the Muslim man, with his aggressive approach towards immigration, with his, in my mind, he had, the Proud Boys.
He's not really asking that. He's asking, what a cult figure Obama was. How did so many more people go for Biden?
It was, I feel like a lot of it was an anti-Trump vote. I mean, the enthusiasm polls. 80%
of Biden votes were anti-Trump, for sure.
Yeah, and the enthusiasm for Trump was way more than it was for Biden. When I went to these freaking Trump-Biden things, the Trump thing, it was like a party. Hey, hanging out, high fives, hanging. This is like a party scene. With the Bidens, it was it wasn't so much they were enthused about Biden. They just really disliked Trump. They really didn't like him. And so you can say that's all media generated. You can put no fault of that on Trump's feet. I disagree. I disagree. The things that Trump said and the way that he operated himself were very, very different. Now, you can take that as saying, oh, he's a genuine person. He's not someone that acts one way behind closed doors and a different in front of you. He was different. The way that he spoke and the way that he articulated things was different. And I think, in fairness, some people didn't like that. I didn't like how much noise Trump was making some of the time. Sometimes I just wanted him to shut the F up a little bit and when the economy was booming, I was like, do you have to always say, well, no one's going to give me credit, but this is the best economy ever. I'm better than Lincoln and I'm better than this. And it was all this stuff. And it was like, Jesus Christ, can you just not make it really about you so much? Like, can you just stay quiet a little bit? I remember when he did some Christmas tweet that was just like, Merry Christmas, I'm doing this and that, and no one feels sorry for me, and I won't get credit for it anyway, but hey, it was like, God, Trump, it's like, why don't you just stand back and
look, there's no doubt in my mind he is a partial narcissist, right? but I think that makes the world go round. I mean, you have strong figures. You know, I understand that he's gotten a lot of, you know, he has naysayers that want a statesman no matter what. They just want somebody who feels like a monarch and like of the blood. And I think he resonated with the sentiment of people who have been resisting certain aspects of PC culture, certain aspects of don't think for yourself, this is the answer. There were certain aspects of that people said, this guy, even though I'm not a billionaire real estate mogul, this guy is like me in terms of I want to punch back. I want to get my point back across. That resonated with people. So is there a way to get both? You know, if Ivanka comes with her stateswomanship and has some of the same policies of a Trump administration, would that be somebody you would vote for? She'll be ready to go in 2020.
Oh, look, I'm a union guy. I'm never going to vote Republican, most likely. Okay, that's just the way it is. But that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate some of the things that the Republicans do. Also, I'm pro-choice. Like I just am. That's part of me. Even though I personally find issues with it, I don't like the idea that Republicans try to sell themselves as I don't want to get involved in your situation, but I am going to get involved with women's decision-making process regarding to their pregnancy. I don't like that. That runs counter.
Well,
and the other thing,
the Republicans are not looking at just the woman; they're looking at the fetus as well as a livable baby. Look,
and I get that.
Stats are that 69% of the country believes that first trimester abortion should be more or less unfettered, so long as it's not paid for by public money, and it's so long as it's not, you know, coerced through, you know, Little Sisters of the Poor, you know, all the various organizations that have a religious bent. This year, Biden got more than half of the Catholic vote. I find that surprising. I'm not a huge fan of the Pope, but if you look,
you liked Ratzinger, that's who you liked.
If you were to design policies, but no, you get guys like Northam in Virginia who want, you know, viable births to be able to be, you know, killed, right? Infanticide. Wow. And that's not, I don't think any Catholic can get on board with that.
You know, this whole late-term abortion stuff that the Republicans bring up are all just it's a secret little way for them to get in and start chipping away. I mean, you've got these states who are just continually trying to pass laws that totally are having to be shut down. I mean, Mike Pence, if it was up to him in Indiana, would get rid of abortions entirely. So it's, you know, they can play cute and act like, oh, it's only the late-term stuff that we're against. Bullshit. They want a constitutional amendment banning abortion, and just be real about it. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the bottom line. And for me, I never got the limited government Republican getting involved in those issues. You want to be limited government. You want to keep the government out of my life. But now we're dealing with this personal issue and the government wants to become and get involved in it. And to me, it never made sense. And here's another thing, okay? If we're talking about, and I talk about this because a lot of what I fear is it's not like I don't have a healthy fear of government authority, right? Government that can give you everything can take it all away. I get that. All power corrupts. Any power concentrations are going to lead to problems, right? But then it's also like they don't give a shit about this massive military enlargement, or that we're the #1 weapons manufacturer and seller in the world, and that those have consequences. So it's like, well, we're okay with, you know, cutting, you know, social welfare programs, but if as long as the military keeps growing, we don't care. It's like, well, wait a minute. Like, limited government is supposed to be across the board, not just social programs in the Department of Education. Let's cut it across the board.
Carry a big stick. I mean, I want a strong military that doesn't need to be deployed.
Right, but okay, but we know how that goes, and maybe Trump avoided some of these things, but you know, people want to use those toys. Those toys are bought and they want to be used. And so I'm all for, you know, like I said, I was okay with him striking Soleimani, but I'm tired of hearing that the only thing that's going to get cut is the Department of Education and the EPA. Like, don't sell me that. And then we continue to have this massive buildup of this massive military that and the surveillance and everything else. It's a question of, if we're going to trim the government, let's talk about trimming everything. Everything should be on the table. And it's, in truth, did the founding fathers envision a standing army and a standing military and a standing NSA and the scope and breadth of this when they started the Constitution? I mean, John Adams eliminated the army, and I'm not saying that that's what we should do, but I feel it's, again, this issue where you're not standing really with your principles. Do we want a limited and smaller government, or do we not? Like, are we here to defend
inside the sandbox of the safety of the individuals in it? Right. We do.
Right.
We want an
Is it
army
possible
to defend us from foreign enemies and maybe even domestic, as we may find out. Right. We want that so that people can pursue their life and liberty. Right.
Okay, I didn't like
the idea.
I didn't like unlicensed Department of Homeland Securities and no name, no tag, going out there and knocking heads for Trump. I didn't like that. And Mad Dog came out against that. The whole charade of him kicking these people, away from the White House, and I didn't like that. I don't want to think, and I don't think we live in a military state or a surveillance state or a police state. I don't believe that, but I do worry about, and then all these weapons and machines left over from the Iraq War made themselves out to our local police forces, and I just. And this is probably another issue about guns that we haven't talked about yet, but I am in favor of reasonable gun control. Do I ever want the Second Amendment abolished? Of course not. I want to keep people armed, and by and large, there's no way we're going to disarm this population, so just deal with it. But do I feel like banning assault rifles would destroy our freedoms? I don't think that. I do think that we can find some ways to try to make guns safer and reduce gun deaths in the United States, which is a terrible thing that a lot of other industrialized nations don't deal with, and ask ourselves,
they don't have guns.
Well, some do, but I'm just saying, it's like
then their civil liberties are encroached. All right, so here's what I'm hearing from you, because I'm hearing a lot of space. We can go back to abortion, not on this episode. We go back to abortion. We can talk about education. I'm a fan of Betsy DeVos. I think I believe in charter.
Of course you are.
I'm a strong believer in charter schools. I don't have children, but I can see where the administrative state has ruined some of that stuff. We can look at guns from a stand. We can dive into these micro issues, because we're at 2 hours. We don't want to bore the hell out of everybody, but I want to make sure that we at least have. So these pieces. Let me just say, as a capping idea, I am surprised. You would not know from URL slinging on Facebook that we had so much commonality. And this is actually proof that this forum is probably a more effective means of meeting in the middle. But I think I didn't hear from you as much of the hyper progressive non-exposure to true media that I expected to. So that's a good thing, right?
Well,
I think there's a lot more, and I think each of these issues that you laid out for things that you're frustrated with, I think each one of those we'd see a lot more convergence. I just that's just my prediction, right?
No,
we agreed on election integrity. You haven't seen the proof. I'm going to have you look for the proof. We'll share the proof. And what I'm hearing mostly is that you wanted more, more statesman-like executive sensibility, and you weren't getting that from him. And so a lot of style points. And so I'm actually seeing, whereas I thought we were going to be easily 180 degrees away from each other, I would guess we're probably within 90.
I think from my perspective is there is, when engaging in these conversations, there's an art of humbleness, and knowing that we may both be able to recognize a problem, but we may not both be able to come up with the perfect solution. And Democrats will have well-intentioned ideas and programs that have disastrous results, right? And so just coming at it from that notion of that I may have something to learn from you. and you for me goes a long way. And even if there's ideas, and I'm sure it goes both ways, that I think are just nuts, it doesn't matter because we're Americans, and I've always said this, that there's so much more that unites us than divides us. And the media and the political parties, in their attempt to gain power, are trying to emphasize these wedge things.
Absolutely.
And in truth, that guy who you may, you know, you're a liberal and he's got a MAGA hat or he supports Trump, maybe the guy who helps you change your tire when you're on the side of the road, or
Oh, no
or
doubt.
you know what I mean? So politics and where people's, and here's another thing too, is that when someone gives a shit about something and is going to go out there and try to make a difference in it, I have to give respect to that because at least they care. At least they're actually trying to do something. They see problems and they try to, and I may not agree with where they're at, but I can't knock a guy for trying, for caring, and for trying
Yeah,
to
we agree.
make the
Right.
country better.
We agree mostly on the what, not all. We don't 100% agree on the what, but we have a lot of common what's and very different hows.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
how to get there is frequently different, but many of our what's overlap. Man, I'm going to close this off with you. You're awesome for being cool. I mean, this didn't go anywhere where we thought it was going to go, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And maybe there's some good morsels in there that are worth, exchange where there's some stuff to revisit and go over. But obviously some micro-targeted, more, tighter issue-based things. We're going to see where this election, fleshes out. We've got until December,
what a year.
We've got until December 14th. And any new things could come to light here. And I hope we'll all be having kind of a 360-degree mindset in terms of looking at what the information is and who's reporting on it and how they are. And I hope we can have another conversation like this, maybe a little tighter, but dude.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you. You take care, buddy.
I hope you had fun. And thanks for coming on. This was our first Left on Red. So first Left on Red, we'll probably do a couple more of these, and you'll probably inspire some of our other naysayers to come on. And
I thought maybe you were going to have the piano out here
and throw me some heat. And throw me some heat. Throw me some heat. Well, I mean, I'll have to throw you some political songs in the meantime.
Okay, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. All right. Well, with that, people who tuned in, thank you for tuning in, and we're going to try to count this out with a good, positive, feel good vibes here. So, Brian, thank you. I appreciate it. And
thank you, Mike.
I'll see you with the sun soon.
All right. Take care, brother.
All right, brother.